important than the truth.
They stick their money. It's got nothing to do with money at all.
We want answers.
I just want answers.
Colin was given his first batch of commercial Factor 8 on the day before his first birthday in August 1983. Then, in 1984, his parents were told he needed a grommet and adenoid operation. His medical notes show he received commercial Factor 8 for that too. Many aspects of Colin's case appear to run against the guidelines at that time.
The recommendations in '83 also indicated that where possible, for children, and these are both the US and the UK recommendations, under the age of 4 should be treated, if possible, with cryoprecipitate.
Colin's parents became suspicious there was more to his ill health than they'd been told because of the reaction of his doctors to one incident. He was sleeping in his brother Daniel's bed.
It was when he had a severe nosebleed. We'd phoned the Heath, and because we just couldn't stop it, and they just said, and it happened overnight. So of course when they got up, they were sort of, Daniel was caked in blood or whatever, and they just said, for God's sake, clean Daniel off. Don't worry about Colin, just clean Daniel off. Did it go in his mouth, or, you know, and that was the first time really that the alarm bells rang.
Flags went up and
they said burn the mattress.
Colin's doctors evidently had concerns about his HIV status. In fact, there's a biohazard sticker in his notes dated June 1985. And a month later, Janet asks again about AIDS. The notes say she was reassured. She was never told that Colin had HIV and only told he had AIDS just 2 months before he died in 1990. Colin's parents want to know if he was one of the virgin haemophiliacs scientists are referred to. We asked Colin's doctor at the time, Dr. Colin Hewlett, why he'd operated, why he'd given Colin the Factor 8 concentrate, and why he didn't warn Colin's parents about the risks. Dr. Hewlett retired just last month, but in his final week he sent me this response.
I have no explanation or excuse for the administration of the potentially contaminated Factor 8 concentrate, save not being fully aware of the infective risk at the time. I can't begin to imagine the long-lasting distress and anguish this has caused Colin's mother. All I can do at this stage is to express my regrets and offer my sincere apologies to her for this whole affair.
Dr. Rietzer was one of the group of several doctors who, after the 1983 warning, decided it was okay to continue using Factor 8 from the US. Some of these key decision makers are now dead, and Dr. Rietzer himself is very elderly. I contacted Dr. Rietzer, and he invited me to his home, though he wouldn't be filmed. He did concede there'd been a culture of gathering as much data as possible, especially on new products. He said scientific research projects referred to as trials were actually just monitoring studies, because all the patients needed the Factor 8 anyway. He said, we shouldn't have used the word trials. We didn't think people would be looking back now at the particular words. He said patients did give consent, though he couldn't remember if that was written or verbal. He said when you're faced with a chap at 2 in the morning that's bleeding, you're faced with what's on the shelf. All eyes are now on the private inquiry that starts taking evidence tomorrow. Some former health ministers have already said they'll testify, and there are even signs that the current government may cooperate. Perhaps those commercially confidential documents are about to be handed over.
There is now a danger that has become a threat to us all. It is a deadly disease and there is no known cure.
Remember those 1980s adverts about AIDS? The fear for surviving haemophiliacs is that the full story comes too late, that the scientists and politicians keep quiet, leaving hundreds without answers, left to die in ignorance.
Susan Watts. Well, we asked the Department of Health for an interview, but they declined to make a minister available. They did give us a statement in which they expressed sympathy for those infected with hepatitis C and HIV and said they'd been open and transparent on the issue. They went on to say, in line with this policy of openness and to address concerns raised following the return of documents previously considered missing from a firm of private solicitors, the Department is currently reviewing all documents in relation to non-A and non-B hepatitis between the period 1970 to 1985. The review is looking at Hep C only. However, reference to HIV is made in some of the documents, and we plan to release as many of these documents